Nderitu, welcome.
Thank you.
And, first of all, everyone, anytime you go around and everyone's talking about the All Africa Games and the African Games, let's start with this change of name. Where did it come in?
It came about because of the games now being controlled by the ANOCA.
The Association of the National Olympic Committees of Africa.
That is true, and they had to give it a name that is common with the other continents, like the Asian Games, Pan American Games, and so forth.
But we know that the African Games have always been, some under what was known as the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, and now the African Union. So where did the ANOCA come in at that point?
The games are still under the African Union, but when it was decided that the African Games will be used as a qualifier for the Olympics, it was obvious that the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, wanted to have ANOCA controlling them so that they are sure that the teams that are selected have the standards that...
and by controlling, you're meaning the technical aspect?
The technical aspect of the games.
So, and looking at that partnership, what is the biggest change that we're going to see, for example, from the games in this year in terms of qualification and participation that was different from 2015 in Brazzaville?
The only difference now is that IOC, the International Olympic Committee, has put more interest in the games, and we do expect that the level of officiating will be a little bit higher. And also, we'll see that the teams will also work very hard to earn qualifications for the Olympic Games, and for that reason, you do expect that they will train harder to make sure that they get that qualification.
Well, talking about qualification, which sports are we looking at when it comes to qualification for the Olympics through the African Games?
Most of the martial arts will have some stages of qualifications handled at the African Games. I would say that in most cases they are martial arts.
So, and for the Olympics, we're talking about judo, taekwondo,
boxing. We have karate now because it's in the Olympics. These are the ones in most cases that you find that some areas of qualifications will be handled at that level.
And for Kenya, at the moment, we know, I would like to go back to Brazzaville in 2015. Kenya's outing there was quite interesting. And just looking at the medal table, 6 gold medals, 9 silver and 17 bronze, 32 in total. And this was because Kenya was participating just after the World Championships in athletics that were held in Beijing. So we know the athletics gold didn't come in. The medals came in from weightlifting. We saw different sports putting in medals. The same case is going to apply for you, for example, for athletics, which is Kenya's mainstay at most of these games. How are you trying to handle athletics? Because they're the next, they'll be doing their qualifiers in about 2 weeks.
That's true.
How do you get the cream of Kenya's athletes to participate at the African Games, knowing that a week later we'll be looking at the World Championships in Doha?
I would say that we learned our lesson in Brazzaville, but at the same time, I won't promise that the top cream will go to Morocco, because definitely the World Championships take precedence. But we'll make sure that whoever represents Kenya and the team that we select will be very close to the top cream.
So, yes, and looking at it, we saw the entry standards that have been released for the African Games. How are you going to administer them at the local scene, and how far back are you going to go?
Definitely, because we have to go by them, we'll make sure that every, the team that is selected conforms to those standards.
So what are the regulations that you're going to use when you hold the trials from the 20th to the 22nd of June for athletics? Let's start with that sport, because that's the most straightforward one.
Well, it's the same. We are going to be guided by the standards that we have been given, and we are strictly going by them.
I would like to refer to what's happening in Doha. For a Kenyan team to participate at the World Championships, 4 tests for athletes, 3 out of competition, 1 in competition. Are the same rules applying for the Sports Council and the African Games?
They are applying, and for that, in that case, we are making sure that ADAC and other bodies that are related to that are fully in control of the team that we're having.
What's the size of the athletics team that you look at having for the African Games?
We are looking at a team of not less than 60.
60 athletes.
That's true.
Yes. And the question that always follows, how many officials?
Well, the officials who will accompany the team are the officials that are needed by the team. Nothing less, nothing more. So we'll make sure also, although we have not received it, the organizers of these games have given quotas for officials so that you cannot take any number that you want. There will be quotas, and we are going to get that in a week's time, which shows if you have a contingent of 60, how many officials are allowed. And you cannot take more than that. And the reason why this is happening is because they are being controlled by the Olympics. The Olympics usually make sure that they have quotas that they give to every team.
Now, this is something that I found out, in the course of covering the Olympics, is that, and also trying to understand the coverage of things like the Commonwealth Games, which are covered under the National Olympic Committee of Kenya.
Yes.
Is that if, for example, you have a team, let's say rugby sevens, normally they will tell you you've got 12 players and they'll tell you 3 officials. But if you want to carry an extra number of officials, then you've got to pay for the accreditation. Does that the same criteria apply if you need a specialist for a particular sport for the African Games?
Yes, the same happens. And that one is also controlled. Because, like, to get entrance into the village, they are strict about the numbers. If you are to take more than that, then you have to look for accommodation outside the village, which is very, very uncomfortable for the participants.
And talking about that, we've mentioned athletics. I can mention other disciplines that have qualified. Women's volleyball, they've qualified and they won gold in Brazzaville, so that's confirmed.
That is true.
Basketball, they're qualifying 3x3, Zone 5, and this is in Uganda. You could tell us about the criteria for the 3x3 basketball?
Definitely, as in all the sports, they want a faster game, and that's the reason why they brought the 3-on-3 on 3. And only one team will qualify from Zone 5. And that means as we go to Uganda, Kampala, to qualify for the games,
yes,
we are going to fight and make sure that we are number one. Otherwise, if we are not number one, we are not going.
Well, we saw that, and I'll tell you this. We witnessed Kenya failing to qualify 2 volleyball teams to the African Games. After Kenya hosted the qualifiers, it was Egypt, Rwanda, Uganda, and Kenya in that order. It's not one of the best results we've seen, as far as volleyball is concerned. Let's move on to another one. Weightlifting. We saw Kenya winning medals in Brazzaville, especially the bronzes. What's the quota for weightlifting that you're looking at?
For now, what we are saying is that we are going to allow 6 weightlifters, both sides, men and women.
So that's 12.
That's 12. And we believe that that will give us some medals.
Boxing. What's the selection criteria? Because this is now another touchy one. We know that the Boxing Association of Kenya, at the moment, they've got their own issues. There is a unified calendar which is operating, and then there is another group that says we are operating this kind of calendar. So how are you going to handle boxing?
We have talked to both sides, and they have agreed that they will have a unified selection whereby there will be only one team and not teams for Kenya.
So how is this selection going to happen? Because we had a Kenya Open in Mombasa and a Kenya Open in Nairobi.
We may have to ignore the two. We may have to ignore the results that we have already and have one that is done under our eye. We have to look at what they are doing.
So let me refer to a global scenario. The IOC is not in good terms with AIBA, the amateur boxing body. So there is a body that, what would I call it? Like an oversight committee or a side body that has been put to oversee boxing qualification for the Olympics, and it's headed by somebody different, which means that boxing federations are now directly being guided by the International Olympic Committee as to how to qualify for Tokyo. So how are you going to run this so that these wrangles within boxing do not affect the sports person?
The most important thing here is, first of all, to ask the two warring functions to come together. And we have already talked to them. The next thing is to set a date for selection, whereby it will be highly publicized. All participants from all sides will be expected to come, and we will have neutral people giving the regulations for these games.
So the new, who's going to select the referees and judges?
Definitely, they will be selected by the officials of the federation. That one is obvious, because we cannot pretend that we have our own people who will do that. But what we are saying is that the National Olympic Committee and the Kenya National Sports Council will have to come together and form a neutral body or neutral observer.
A selection team.
Who will now oversee the selection of this of the national team.
Well, for those of you in boxing and you want to find out about what exactly goes on with that sport, then you've got your own reasons to find out and follow up and know that there is going to be an independent selection. So the pugilists, they'll better get ready. Now let's move on. Table tennis, they did their selection.
Yes, they have done.
What's the contingent size for Kenya?
We are also giving them a contingent of around 12. For both men and women.
And women.
Yes.
Shooting.
We are also, I'm not very sure whether they have done the selection, but also we are allowing them 4-4.
4-4.
Yes.
Now, equestrian. Do we have horse riders who are going to do show jumping? Because it's not the usual Ngong race course type. Because this is now show jumping for horse.
Yes, and we did that in 9th All Africa Games in Algiers, where we took 2 riders. And even this time, we are likely to take 2.
So where do you pick the riders from?
There is an association that deals with that.
Yes.
And we have already had talks with them, and they have assured us that they will be able to come up with a strong team for that.
Archery?
Archery, as usual, we have a team, and this is the same team that has gone to the Olympics and also the Commonwealth Games.
One archer.
So
a one-person team, and the mother is a team manager.
We already know who.
So we already tennis. Now this is a story. 1987, we saw Paulo Ekesa, Kenya's best ever tennis player.
Yes.
Broke into the 100, played in every Grand Slam. What's the contingent like for tennis at the moment?
It's also going to be like 4-4. 4 ladies and 4 men. And most likely we can increase the number of men to make 6. And we think we have good players in tennis this time.
Okay, we will see, because Kenya is in the Davis Cup, and actually this will be a good warm-up for them because they're playing in September.
They have been doing well, and we do hope that they will do very well in Morocco.
Another event that has had crazy selections, swimming.
Yes.
How are you going to handle this? Because in the run-up to the Commonwealth Games and the Olympics, it was ugly.
Yes.
No one wants to see that. How are you going to handle this?
They have assured us that this time there will be no issues, and that they will do the best they can do, and especially make use of those who have had scholarships outside, and they are already doing very well in other competitions in the world.
So, for example, Maria Brunlena, who won 3 medals at the Africa Youth Games last year, would she be considered in the team?
We have not received the team yet, but we believe these are the people that should be considered.
Now, so the other teams that I would like to look at is wrestling. How do you pick the wrestling team?
It's the same thing. We have clubs that do that, and what they will do, they will call open selection, which will be supervised by the local organizing committee, where the National Olympic Committee and the Kenya National Sports Council go as observers. And I believe that it will be done fairly.
Now, let's talk about the size of the Kenyan contingent. This one always shocks people. What's the size of the African Games contingent, considering we're looking at about 22 disciplines in total?
It is usually around 400. Remember that the Africa Games is the one that carries the biggest number of participating teams. And looking at also the team events, like volleyball, like handball, usually they are large teams, because if you talk of volleyball, you are talking about 14.
14. No.
They allowed 14 players.
Yes.
And obviously about 4 officials.
Yes.
If you are talking of handball, you are talking of 16 players and around 4 officials. So you see already that is big enough. And that's the reason why I'm saying that we are looking at a contingent of about 390.
All right. And who's funding this?
It's funded by the government fully. You know, unlike other games like the Olympics and Commonwealth Games, where the IOC chips in a bit, where also there is a lot of sponsorship from corporate bodies, Africa Games are fully sponsored by the government.
And is this through the sports fund, or is it directly from the ministry?
I believe this time the sports fund will help.
All right.
But in the past, it has always been the government fully. But now the sports fund will come in.
This is going to be an extraordinary African Games, and it's going to, the management of the team really goes into the performance of the team, how the general team management happens. There's a Rabat zone, which has got about 10 disciplines, Casablanca, which has got swimming, handball, the martial arts at badminton. We've got El Jadida, which has got wrestling, and Hemiset, which has got the flat water, that's rowing and canoeing. How are you going to manage 4 zones effectively for optimal medal collection, as we would say?
What we'll do is that we have one general team manager who has a deputy, and we are also looking at other 2 officials who will be at the level of deputy GTM, so that every venue has at least a team manager, a general team manager.
A deputy general team manager,
yes,
so to speak. Yes.
Yes.
And so that means that you've got 4 officials who are overseeing different venues.
That is true.
A chaperone?
Chaperone depends on whether we have a women's team in that particular city.
So that means everything is well taken care of?
It is taken care of. We have enough officials, and they will be trained properly to handle those teams while outside there.
During the Olympics, it turned out that some of the reports indicated that teams were being asked to leave earlier than they wanted, or get to a point later than they would have liked. How are you going to manage this, especially for team sport?
We are going to listen to the technical officials of these games. We know that, and if I go to athletics, you'll find that if you take long distances early enough, they will lose the qualities they get from high altitude training. And therefore, you must listen to the technical officials and take them at the right time. We are going to do the same. We are going to make sure that we scientifically look at what are they going to do. Is it advantageous to take them early or late, or at what point? That will be handled.
Well, we've been in conversation with the chairman of the Kenya National Sports Council, who's also the chef de mission of Team Kenya to the 12th African Games. You know, Kenya is going to be represented by 22 disciplines, and you've heard them and how the selection criteria is going to happen. Athletics, 20th to the 22nd of June, basketball around the same time, and we've seen the women's volleyball team qualify, individual sports, all days happening, especially when it comes to swimming and things like that. And we hope to see Team Kenya perform much better and collect more gold than they did collect in Brazzaville in 2015. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you.